Thanks for tuning in to a special ThunderCast live episode. Usually you see us out on, the home football games at a tailgate or whatever, but this is a little bit special. This is the 2023 National Signing Day recap for the Marshall Thundering Herd football program. This whole thing is going to be powered by IgniteLink and only available on the ThunderCast YouTube channel. So if you're hoping to catch this on Spotify, it ain't going to happen. You're going to have to head on over to YouTube and watch it there. Russ, it was a big class. You were able to go to the signing day event yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to have some reaction from the press conference. We're going to have some reaction from other announcements that were made at those events. And, of course, we're going to break down the class. So where would be the best place to start, do you think?
I don't know. Let's talk about the class maybe real quick, maybe the size of it, that sort of thing, how it breaks down. There were 25. 12 of those were high school, the traditional, as of several years back, recruiting class. 13 came via transfer. A little bit defensive heavy with the numbers. I think it was 17 or 18 out of 25.
Yep.
On the defensive side. And Coach mentioned some of that, which we'll get into here in a little bit. We'll see what he has to say, and then we'll give our thoughts about it. But I don't really want to say anyone's a standout because I feel like that's unfair. We've not seen him play.
Well, I think what you have is the opportunity for guys to stand out because of filling a position of need, right? So
I can see that. Yeah,
that's kind of where that comes into play for me. It's not necessarily that they're the quote unquote star of the class. It's that they're going to have an opportunity to make a bigger impact at a bigger position of need where Marshall's needs to reload a little bit or isn't quite as heavy depth wise. Some generalities that I guess we need to talk about before we start talking about individual players. You mentioned this is a very defensive heavy class, and you're right. It was 18 total guys on defense, 7 from the offensive side of the ball. But just to break that down a tad further by position, of the 18 on defense, 7 defensive backs, 6 linebackers, and 5 defensive linemen. On the offensive side of the ball, of the 7 newcomers to the class in 2023, 3 offensive linemen, 2 wide receivers, and 2 tight ends. And if you're into that sort of thing, which we know a lot of fans are, 6 of those 13 transfers are Power 5 guys, 3 from the ACC and 3 from the SEC. But look, that doesn't mean anything to me. If you're a dog, you're a dog. If you can play, you can play. And we've proven that of guys that come here and play. And we produce national leaders right here in Huntington, and we ain't Power 5. We are just a quality football team that puts some dogs on the field. So for those of you that hang your hat on that sort of thing, there's that stat for you. So that going forward, where'd you like to start? Transfer guys, high school guys?
Let's go high school. Okay. And I'll just run down them here. If you want to interrupt me and talk about somebody, I'll tell you a little bit. These were all in alphabetical order as they were presented, both on the information sheet that they gave us at the media event, but also at the signing day party as well. Those that were present were lined up alphabetically and brought on stage. So I've got Caleb Clark Glover. He's a defensive back, 5'11", 165, out of Springdale, Ohio, went to Cincinnati Princeton High School. I don't feel like I need to read the entire bio, but he was there yesterday, so I got to see him in person. Got to hear him talk. He answered some questions to the media. All of those that were present got asked a little bit. And without going into all those, because we're not going to show you those interviews, the prevailing question was like, why did you choose Marshall?
Of course.
The prevailing answer was the culture, which later you'll hear Coach Huff mention things about culture. In almost every little answer that he gave, he talked about the culture here at Marshall. So Caleb, again, defensive back, another defensive back, CJ Davis. Did you want to talk about?
Yeah, I think what I need to do to provide some context to the viewers is give them the bullet points that they really want to know about, right? So you can give me these measurables, and what I'll do is, for example, Caleb was a 3-star prospect, and he chose the Herd over Air Force, Army, Navy, Old Dominion, and Toledo, and others. But that kind of gives folks an idea. That's the kind of stuff they want to know. Again, just like the Power 5 transfer thing, so many folks want to know that star rating, like that ultimately matters. I don't want that to come off the wrong way, but if you can play, you can play, right? Star ratings don't really matter until once you line up, you got to beat the guy across from you. But still, it's an important thing that most folks want to know about. So that's what I'll share.
All right. CJ Davis is also a defensive back, 6 foot even, 175, Fort Wayne, Indiana, and he went to Bishop Dwenger High School.
Yeah, also a 3-star prospect, but notably rated the number 24 prospect in the state of Indiana in the 2023 class. And again, he chose the herd over some of the service academies, the Air Force and Army, and a couple of the directional Michigans as well, Central and Western Michigan. So a lot of MAC flavor and service academy flavor in on CJ Davis, but ultimately chooses the herd.
Ahmere Foster, yet another defensive back, 5'9", 165, out of Miami, Florida. Christopher Columbus High School. One note that Coach mentioned during the signing party event at 6 last night was that his coach used to be here as a coach, and he didn't mention him by name. I did not look that up, so I don't have that note here. If you know it, spill it.
Not.
But anyway, that was one of the deals that he obviously knew about Marshall from his coach.
Yeah, had the relationship there, and this is the first time we start dabbling into a recruiting battle with other Sun Belt Conference schools. Ahmere chooses the herd over Coastal, James Madison, and a couple of others, outliers, of course, Florida Atlantic, kind of a hometown school there down in that area, and Akron, also a 3-star prospect. So Marshall 3 for 3 out of the gate with 3-star prospects, all from the defensive backfield.
Next is Ian Foster, defensive back, 5'11", 180, out of Brundage, Alabama. High school was Pike County. A note that I need to tell the viewers about this: we showed this kind of early on Twitter when we retweeted when he committed, but he is a offense and defensive guy, and he had a lot of touchdowns. And he seems to be one of those guys that he could take it to the house with a pick 6, or might end up being a special teams guy if he doesn't make his way over to the wide receiver room. I don't think that they'll do kind of dual threat, but who knows?
Yeah, you never know. I mean, position changes aren't something new to the herd. Obviously, some of our all-time greats have been because of position changes. But it's not, we can't put the cart before the horse. This might be a guy you see competing in a special teams realm. But you mentioned, some offensive stats there, and they're not little. I mean, almost 900 yards receiving, 19 touchdowns, a couple of kick returns for touchdown. I mean, there's ability there, right? But if Marshall's listing you as a DB, then that's where I would tend to think you're going to compete most. Also a 3-star prospect, chose the herd over Vanderbilt, Navy, Army, and several others.
You mentioned 19 touchdowns, but what I want to mention too, those came on 28 passes.
Right. Yeah.
And he added 2 kickoff returns and a punt return. That's why I think, this guy's a danger to take it to the house. I think you're going to see him on punt or kickoff at the minimum.
Yeah.
But, watch out. I feel like kind of, when you always saw Ed Reed with an interception, you just kind of assumed there's an 80% chance he was going to take it back.
You can hold your breath for a minute. This would be something special. Yeah, that's kind of mind-blowing. 19 touchdowns on 28 receptions. Gee, that's video game numbers, man.
Ed Reed was either going to score a touchdown or throw a lateral to somebody else. So, All right, next is Jayven Hall, linebacker, 6'2", 230, good size coming out of high school for a linebacker. Woodstock, Georgia. High school was Roswell.
So a 3-star prospect, but the thing that gets me is he had 30 Division I offers. 30 Division I. There's like 130 teams in Division I ball, and in the FBS ball, I guess, but still 30 offers. So he chooses the herd over some kind of heavy hitters, especially in this new, in the news cycle this season, right? And I'm talking about Colorado, right? Coach chooses the herd, Coach Huff over Coach Prime. Kansas State, big time performer in the Big 12. Kansas on the uptick. UCF, Houston, East Carolina, Memphis, Tulane, Syracuse, again with the Sun Belt flavor with Coastal Carolina, Charlotte, and rounding out that Sun Belt Conference flavor with Georgia State. So lots of Big 12 interest, lots of AAC interest. So I think we got us one here. This could be a guy that we might be talking about after spring ball maybe we're like, this could be the, one of those breakout guys like we normally talk about. So this is one I'll keep an eye on for sure.
Well, to add a little bit more info, if I am not mistaken, this is the one that Coach Huff said he had a torn labrum in 2022, so he didn't play. It says here in the bio that he only played 2 games, but he definitely did not play much. And his junior stats, he had 153 tackles as a junior. So, yeah, he's one to watch, but we also have to watch and see how quickly he can heal up and everything. So next is Mathias Haygood. He's a linebacker, 6'3", 210, out of Fayetteville, Georgia. Sandy Creek High School, one of 2 players that we're picking up from Sandy Creek.
Yep. This is one of those that this is where I don't really always hang my hat on a star rating, right? Because you never know necessarily why or why not a rating was given, and there is no star rating for Mr. Haygood, and it could be something as simple as he chose not to work the camp circuit, right? Because a lot of those are rival star ratings, 24/7 star ratings, something like that, and generally those come from working the camp circuit. Or at least participating in some of those camps. And if that's not your game, well, then you often will fly under the radar. And at 6'3", 210, I don't know whose radar you're flying under. But if Shannon Morrison likes what you can do, I like what you can do. So this is a potential for another. And you mentioned we picked up a teammate. Could be, and we'll get to him in a little bit, obviously, but this could be a really, really sneaky good duo from Sandy Creek High School.
Yeah, and Coach talked about a couple of these. One that you have to recruit around the country and things like that, because then you start developing relationships there. And then when those players come here, the underclassmen that they remember, they start knowing about Marshall and things like that. So I think that it was good to pick up down here. And he also talked about some diamonds in the rough that snuck through, all because of the transfer portal and high schools not being recruited as well because of transfers. And he said that he got some really good gems. So a lot of these could fit that bill. Next, we got TaShawn Jeter, defensive back, 6'2", 180, out of Winston-Salem, North Carolina, went to R.J. Reynolds High School.
Yeah, another 3-star prospect. One of the top 50 players in the state of North Carolina, and got a little bit of SEC love. So chose the Herd over Arkansas, which we know a former coach for the Herd is down there at Arkansas, Dominic Bowman, a guy we thought highly of when he was on staff here. We know is a real excellent teacher from the defensive backfield positions, not just corners. So to get a guy like that who Bowman had some interest in, says something, because we saw how our defensive secondary has performed over the last couple of seasons. And yes, Bowman wasn't on staff last year, but a lot of the guys that were under his tutelage the year before were. Also come to the Herd over Iowa State and Sun Belt Conference East Division foe, Old Dominion.
Next, we got Shawn Rouse, offensive line, 6'4", 260, local kid here in Milton, West Virginia, and went to Cabell Midland.
Yeah, first team All-MSAC. Got to love that. Anytime you can keep the local kids coming here, and especially at a position of need like offensive line where we've seen local guys thrive. I just love to see that. This area in particular, Spring Valley, Huntington High School, and Cabell Midland has been a real hotbed of talent from both offensive and defensive line positions. And anytime you can keep the best of those here, that says something. He had some other offers, so it's not like it was just a Herd or nothing. JMU was in, Eastern Kentucky was in, Murray was in, but ultimately decides to stay at home, play 20 minutes down the road. And the Rouse family will be in attendance, and a lot of ONA will be in attendance. It's that recruiting those type of guys is more than just keeping quality talent at home. It's also providing athletes that are familiar in the area that more local fans can rally around. I just love that.
Yeah. On our show, Coach mentioned that we had some speedier wide receivers that could help hit the crease and everything, catch some balls. But he talked about needing to have some big-bodied tight ends, and one of which he filled right here. Tracy Stephens, a tight end, 6'5", 260, out of Columbia, South Carolina, went to Ridgeview High School.
Yeah, the stat line doesn't blow you away. So, but still productive nonetheless. Handful of passes, 160 some yards, trio of touchdowns on the year. So, can make the catch, can move the chain, can get into the end zone. It seems like he may be a year away, need to get in there, get with BA and that sort of thing. But this looks like, I don't want to call Tracy a project because at 6'5", 260, you've got to build, right? But the things that this athletic performance staff will be able to do with him to where he is like really ready to roll next year is cause for excitement. But in the meantime, still had some big offers. So there were some folks that had some high praise for him. My local school here, USF, was in. And, of course, another Sunbelt team, Georgia State, was in, and ultimately, again, chooses to come to the herd over, a couple of fairly decent schools.
Yeah, and stats, when you're a receiver, sometimes can be a little deceiving because you don't know if that was even a passing school. Maybe they were a run 80% of the time like it was, in Southern West Virginia. But he did catch 10 passes, 164 yards, which is very, very good, 16.4 yards per catch, and
Right.
3 touchdowns out of those 10. So he does show some ability when he is targeted.
Yeah. I mean, the school he's at may not have emphasized the tight end.
Sure.
The skill set is there, and I don't mean to say that it isn't. I'm just saying, we talk so often about needing to get into a college strength program, go through all that, and then see what it's like, see what you're like after that's over. And I feel like with this raw talent build, the sky's kind of the limit here after getting that body ready for college ball.
Next, we got Beni Tshita, defensive lineman, 6'3", 260, out of Louisville, Kentucky. Went to DuPont Manual High School. And something to note about him, Coach said he is from African descent. His family came over here, and he has only played football for 2 years. So he is still learning, and he was on his tape just overpowering people. Just running right through defensive linemen, defensive end. Offensive linemen, offensive guards and tackles, and from the defensive end position, defensive line position, and even a couple of double teams were just not doing much to slow him down. So looks really, really impressive.
Yeah, and another thing about him is, like you mentioned, Louisville kid, right? So
yeah,
you like to think that maybe you'll get some traveling fans, right? Because it's 3 hours away. It's an easy game day trip. This is one that I was really excited about because I felt like fell under the radar for a lot of folks, and Marshall was just able to get in on early and sink those claws in and get him to be all about the herd. Again, a 3-star prospect, had a few offers locally, but I would expect that with more tape, with more experience, and just not as much rawness, there would have been some higher profile schools in on Beni big time, especially teams like, Louisville, right?
Yeah.
But as it sits, he had offers from Central Michigan and Eastern Kentucky. And I mean, no offense, but of those, that's a no-brainer to come to play in Huntington for Ralph Street, right?
One of the most astounding stats I've seen was that he had 7 block kicks. The kid has only been playing football for 2 years, and he blocked 7 kicks. I don't care if that took 2 years in the 2 seasons that he did. That's a lot of kicks to block.
Yeah. I mean, there's guys that played their entire careers from Pee Wee to the NFL and never blocked 7 kicks.
Yeah. I'm one of them. Are you?
Oh, definitely one of them.
Wait, I never played in the NFL. Next up, we've got the second person from Sandy Creek High School, Mikailin Warren, defensive lineman, 6'4", 385, from Baltimore, Maryland, is his hometown.
Yeah. emphasis on the defensive line, right? And I love the note here that says a born gap stuffer in the middle, because I'm thinking about how he fits in with guys that we already have there that just take up space, and they're going to make running lanes even more difficult. And then when you toss in the fact that you're 6'4", 385, the strength that comes along with that, the leverages that come along with that, and the things you're able to do also when coupling with pass rushers that we have that are coming off those edges, this is an excellent addition to the class. Another one of those guys without a star rating, because like I said, you never know what the reason was, but these are the guys that I like that we find, because it means that they've gone, some teams may not are maybe not working as hard as we are to discover this type of talent. And that's why we end up with those type of guys. So I don't know how you can't get excited about 6'4", 385 along the defensive line playing next to guys like Taquez Legs, right?
And those two guys from Sandy Creek, neither one of them have star rating. Maybe that entire region is just not being looked at. Maybe that school system they are in, they didn't give them a star rating because of the level that they played. I don't care. That's the sort of thing that brings down your national rankings, your conference rankings.
Yeah.
Who cares about those?
Doesn't matter.
Go back and look at the stars that were given to some of the best players that are all-time Herd players and ask if they were a 2-star or an unranked prospect.
Right. Keem Cato, 2-star prospect. Devin Johnson, 2-star linebacker prospect. Yeah. Turns into being two of the greatest to ever put on the Kelly Green and White.
Yeah, to me, it's just that's not on the players. That's on the scouts that are doing it. And a lot of those, they cannot possibly do anything more than just either go by somebody's word or watch a highlight tape that's 3 minutes long and say, yeah, I'm going to give him that.
So here's the other thing that goes with that. Let's say prospect A has no star rating. Well, all of a sudden, somebody at Auburn is like, hey, this kid's kind of special, and they toss him an offer. What do you bet he stays without a star rating? Not at all, because, all of a sudden, prestigious program A sees this guy, gives him an offer, and now, he's obviously something super special. Well, he was always something super special. It's just everybody missed it, and we didn't.
We're going to finish up the high school players with Jaden Yates, linebacker, 6'1", 220, hometown of Chicago, Illinois, also listed as Columbus, Ohio, because that's where he moved to. Gahanna Lincoln High School. Obviously, this is Max Yates, linebacker extraordinaire and Marshall Hall of Famer. It's his son.
Yeah, and another one of those legacy prospects that seem to be making their way to Herd rosters nowadays. And this is one that I think a lot of Herd fans are excited about, because they think back to when Max was a linebacker. It's natural, right? You're going to think back like, man, Max was a beast, so Jaden's probably going to be a beast too. And early on, I don't think you can dispute that. He's never played, obviously, a down for the Herd, but if you're an all-Ohio first-team performer, you can play ball, right? And Jaden was a first-team all-Ohio selection. And I've said it before, we as Herd fans, any fans really, you will put some unjust pressure on a newcomer just because of their last name. We saw how many people did you come in contact with this past season about Cole, and I said it and I'll say it again, you can't worry about being the next, in this case, Max Yates. You have to be the first Jaden Yates. And I think these guys have been taught that, they know that. They've been told that their entire lives. Like any good dad wants their children to far exceed anything they're able to accomplish, right? I do.
He answered that during the question and answer period during the media event, and he said that, yes, his dad always told him he'd look good in Kelly Green and all that. Sure. His dad encouraged him to go wherever. But he also has a huge love for Marshall. His dad does. And he, kind of told him, yeah, he'd look good in Kelly Green. But ultimately he said that his dad, they have the same last name, drastically different first name, and he's going to be the first Jaden Yates and carve out his own legacy.
Damn right. Yeah. But it comes to Marshall with some big-time offers to choosing the Herd. And of course, a little family nudging never hurt nobody, right? And we're appreciative of that. Comes to the Herd over University of Kentucky, Ohio University, and Toledo, among others. there was some heavy interest there with a couple of other Big Ten schools and some heavy hitting Big Ten schools, especially in recent years. Minnesota's won a lot of games, and Wisconsin, with the hiring of Luke Fickell, is on the uptick, and a lot of folks are choosing him as their sexy pick in the Big Ten type thing. So some big time schools coming after Jaden, and I'm glad that, a little nudge of familiarity and maybe Hall of Fameism helped push him this way, because we're damn sure glad to have him.
These next, we're moving on to the transfers, and I don't really want to say that we're going to gloss over them, but fans are going to be a little more familiar with them because they have college stats out there. They know where they transferred from. They've seen them on Twitter and that sort of thing. So we'll go again. These are in alphabetical order. Kesean Brown, linebacker, 6'2", 220, Columbia, South Carolina, transferred from App State. And this was the gentleman that put on a little bit of angst toward his former school, and they get to play each other, and he is looking forward to it. I can tell you that. I guarantee
you. Yeah, he was not shy about, the bringing to light the kind of the circumstance. And I don't know the details, right? But from what I gather, it feels like they chose not to renew his scholarship. Right. Mm-hmm. And we talked about that before. A lot of folks think that it's a guaranteed thing, and no, it's a year-to-year deal. And it sounds like, from what I deduced, that they chose not to renew his scholarship. And if I'm not mistaken, he's either a senior or a graduate transfer. It doesn't say here, but he was towards the end of his career at App State. Yeah. So to have that happen is really it was really a gut punch, and one I'm just say it's not cool, right? So he's already went out and sacrificed for you and performed for you and blood, sweat, and tears and that whole thing, and to just not have your scholarship renewed is, I feel like you've earned that, right? So insert the herd. And I think he was really happy to come over to a Sun Belt Conference East Division team, and a rival team to boot, because that's a guaranteed game. He's going to get one shot at App State, and I guarantee it's circled on his calendar. Now, I guess it is. Just in house cleaning duties, we should mention that he chose to come to Marshall over a couple of other schools, mainly SMU and Indiana. So there was some big time interest out there. SMU's been a really winning program lately. And Indiana, of course, anytime you can get an opportunity to go to the Big Ten and compete, you would like to think that's going to weigh heavy. But we're damn glad to have him.
Yeah. Next is Michael Green, defensive line, 6'4", 250, transfer from the University of Virginia. Quick little note, and I put this out there on Twitter last night from the signing day event, but jokingly, when he was sitting real close to me, he got up for his turn to go up in the line, and he was hungry and had some Chick-fil-A, and I said, "You want me to eat the rest of that while you're gone?" And he said, "Not if you want to live." So I let him just eat the rest, man. I wasn't too hungry, I was like,
you don't want to let a good sandwich go to waste. I mean,
nah, man, he could have it. It's no big deal.
So this is great. Another one of those, what we fully believe will continue the theme of defensive line, which of course is violent and disruptive. We saw that a lot last year, and this is a continuation of that. 6'4", 250, comes from UVA and chooses to come to the herd over a ton of in-conference, Virginia's conference suitors. Mainly Virginia Tech, Pitt, and that's big time schools right there. The Pitt and the defense are kind of synonymous here in recent history. Virginia Tech's always bringing a semi-strong defense, and a couple of other schools. UK was in on them, and Kansas State, two teams also known for the defense, particularly the University of Kentucky. So this is one of those instant impact guys you might want to put a star around and remember the name for when we get into spring ball.
All right, we got DeMarcus Harris, wide receiver, 6'1", 190, and he's transferring over from Kentucky. And he said, obviously, Coach Bo Knight was the reason that he came here. They had the relationship there before.
Yeah, I'm not sure that he was really considering maybe going somewhere else. This looks like one of those scenarios where it's like, I'm going to hit the portal and I want to go, if there's an opportunity for me to go play for a coach that I'm familiar with, that's what I want to do. And there was, so he just came to the herd and, provides some explosiveness. When we had Coach Huff on the show, he was talking about the wide receiver position and how he felt we needed to be more explosive from the wide receiver position. and he goes out and gets a couple of guys. And we'll talk about another one here in a little bit. A guy I know you're really excited about. But DeMarcus Harris is another one of those guys that we think can provide super instant impact, especially taking into account some of the losses that we saw in the portal. Could fit right in there with who's coming back and who gets healthy to really take this receiving core to the next level. The next level.
All right, we got Tah Mac-Bright, linebacker, 6'2", 230, out of transfer out of Incarnate Word. And a little bit of note about him, Coach said that when he came up here for his visit, when Coach was talking, he was taking notes. When they did something else, another activity, he was taking notes. When they were doing this, he was taking notes. And he was like, "Son, do you also play or do you just take notes?" You know, but it was about every little thing. He said that this guy really just studies, takes notes, and that he's going to pick it up quick.
Yeah. And that's good. 6'2", 230 from the linebacking position. We know there were some guys that have departed either through transfer or exhaustion of eligibility. And of course, a big weapon, Eli Neal's coming back. And to be able to potentially plug in a guy like this, who's been in the game, competed at the FCS level, and is what appears to be very studious in his approach, very meticulous in his approach, should translate well to what we are hoping to see on the field. Also garnered some attention from a couple of Conference USA schools, Western Kentucky and Florida International in particular, and chose to come to the herd. But this is nice. Anytime we talk about a guy that takes this type of approach, and we listen to Huff and talk about, guys want to come here and it's all about raising their stock or improving their standing. That's the type of approach you think some of these guys want. You're like, this is my opportunity, right? There was an opportunity for me to go up a level of competition. I'm going to take that opportunity. I'm not going to let any bit of that pass. I'm going to capitalize on every moment of it I can. And if his way of doing that is taking meticulous notes and learning the intricacies of the system that he's in, more power to him, because I sure like to hear it.
Yeah. Next, we've got Kylen McCracken, defensive line, 6'3", 305, and he transferred from Ohio University.
So the second rival for Marshall to take a transfer from, historic rival Ohio University, defensive lineman again, 6'3", 305. I mean, yeah, we talked about losing some pieces off of this defensive line, but man, if we ain't trying to put them right back. And these measurables are wonderful. I mean, I don't know what else to say. These are big guys. These are big bodies, and they're going to be hard to move around. Just a 1-year guy, though, but we saw some success out of 1-year guys last year, right? We brought in a handful of them, and they were impact players. Damian Barber, Anthony Watts. And McCracken could be the very next one to be that guy. So, I love the way this, at least on paper, I love the way this defensive line is shaping up, and we're not even finished yet.
Standout wrestler was mentioned for him too. And, I have long thought that the toughest guys around are wrestlers. I mean, they just know how to move their body, maximize their leverage, that sort of thing. And to have one of those on the defensive line or offensive line in the trenches, that's usually a very good thing. If they've got a lot of experience with that, they are generally stronger due to the programs that they've been involved in. And again, the leverage and all that sort of thing. So I'm kind of looking forward to seeing what he can do out there. Next, we got Josh Moton, defensive back, 6 foot, 175, transfer from Texas A&M, originally from the Washington, D.C., Maryland area. And Coach mentioned a very good story about him was that he recruited him when he was at Penn State. And, being from the area, he was recruiting that area. He went down there and he walked in and had his Penn State logos on. And he said Josh laughed at him, said, "Nope, you're not from the SEC." And he was like, I'll never play for Coach Huff because he's not with the SEC. And he went to Texas A&M, and now he's in the transfer portal. And he said,
Maybe I'll play for Coach Huff.
Hey Josh, here I am. But he remembered Coach Huff, and Coach said he was looking forward to making him eat it a little bit now that he's.
That's a good story. But yeah, this is one that really wasn't on the radar. And I'd like to think this is one of those that they were keeping close to the vest that Coach Huff had alluded to when we had him on the show, that they were really not putting everything out there because they had to wait to get guys enrolled and in a class. And since we hadn't seen anything really on Josh Moton, I would like to think that he's one of those guys. I think there are several here that we're going to talk about here coming up. But this is a pretty big time get, especially from the defensive backfield, a 4-star recruit in the 2020 class, and he's been in the SEC and been in the Texas A&M strength programs and that type of stuff, and practicing against some of the best players in the country and all that kind of stuff. And that matters. That matters. Now it's arguable that Texas A&M is one of a handful of teams that has done less with more for a long time, but it still doesn't mean they don't have the finest of everything. So they have the finest training facilities, coaches, everything to maximize the talent of their players. Now, whether they can put it all together on Saturday is a totally different animal, but we'll damn sure take all of those resources and bring them here to Huntington and try to exploit those talents for our benefit here. I think this is a really interesting story that you shared. And when he hit the portal, man, he had offers from who's who. So if this doesn't light your fire a little bit, let me rip off some schools here. Michigan, Oregon, Oklahoma, Penn State, North Carolina, South Carolina, Kentucky, Wisconsin, and yes, everyone's favorite, WVU. So to get this guy, instant impact player. And when you talk about somebody that we know can perform like J.J. Roberts, this could be the second year in a row that we see two brand new guys at the safety position, or if he's going to play corner, to go the opposite side with Mike Abraham. I mean, there's a lot there. There's a lot there. This is definitely one to get excited about.
They had one little blurb about his stats from his senior year in high school, just to let everybody know. He was only thrown at in his direction as a defensive back 16 times. In those 16 times, he had 4 interceptions and 8 pass breakups. So
what?
He
4 completed
allowed
passes all year?
He allowed 4 completed passes as a senior.
Jeez.
No wonder all those teams were after him, and he wanted to go to the SEC, and ultimately did go to the SEC.
Yeah.
Another good story over here. Chinazo goes by CK Obobi, and he's an offensive line, 6'5", 310, out of Laney Community College over in California, but he comes from London, the UK, and he had talked about growing up. They don't have a lot of American football over there. He said that he did play football, but obviously he means soccer. And, that's going to show a lot of coordination and things like that. We've seen soccer players or people growing up playing soccer have a lot of coordination and footwork and great things in other sports, and that plays out well. Big, strong kid. And he is very much looking forward to it. And because he doesn't have much family over here in the States, he said that the number one thing that attracted him to Marshall was how everyone here was family. And that's what he was looking for.
Well, I think he hit a home run with that decision because, we're biased, but man, we really do feel like that, our athletic programs, our athletes, they're like our kids, our brothers, our sisters, that's what it feels like. And if you're looking for a family aspect, I don't think you're going to find a better one than here, with the story. And as he learns more about Marshall, I think that point will get driven home even closer to him. But the number one offensive lineman in Europe. I mean, Europe's still pretty big, man. And there's still plenty of people that play. And we've seen several prospects over the last, let's say, decade or so that have, come to America from Europe and performed at a high level and been big time recruits and even got drafted, in early rounds of the NFL. So another one of those guys that may have fallen under the radar a little bit because he's a tad bit probably raw, but 6'5", 310, Bill Legg announced, we'll talk about this a little bit more, going to be the offensive line coach moving forward. If anybody can teach offensive line play, it's going to be Bill Legg, right? He chooses to come to the herd over Sunbelt champion Troy, North Texas, New Mexico, and UTEP. So excited to have him, a big addition to the offensive line. We're just going to have to see how that development goes in under the tutelage of Bill Legg.
We mentioned wide receivers and needing to be explosive, and this next guy fits the bill. Mason Pierce, wide receiver, 5'7", 165, out of McNeese State, and he talked about that a little bit of the pipeline. Guidry had recruited him, and that he was familiar with Andre Sam, so he was talking about all that. This guy, if you've not seen his video, he is lightning quick and fast, which are two different things. And he is probably going to be our special teams returner. I can't imagine anybody doing better than what I've seen of this guy. He just seems to have a knack for finding the seam, running right past everybody into the end zone.
Yeah, we've got some guys here that are all conference performers of the punt returns, and we've had some big plays in kick returns, right? Jaden Harrison comes to mind, Talik Keaton comes to mind, and we talked about earlier one of the high school guys that could be competing, Ahmere Foster, for special teams play. So that competition will be pretty fierce, I imagine. But Mason Pierce, 5'7", 165 from McNeese, first team all Southland Conference punt returner, second team all Southland Conference wide receiver. The accolades are there. The performance in collegiate games are there. So it's just another weapon to potentially provide some explosiveness from the wide receiver core while also double dipping in the special teams game. I know this is a guy that you were excited about, and this is a guy that I'm really excited to further, report on, dive into, learn more about as we get into spring ball.
Next up, J.J. Roberts, defensive back, 6 foot, 190. Transfer out of Wake Forest, but he is a local kid from Cabell Midland.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I remember when J.J. was being recruited out of high school, one of the top players in the state of West Virginia. And I was really kind of bummed that we didn't land him the first time around, but he went down to Wake Forest. Can't blame a kid for, wanting to check some new horizons and see how things go. Went to Winston-Salem, played quite a bit of football down there, made some big time plays, and then decided to enter the portal. And there was a lot of interest for JJ. Virginia Tech, WVU, Virginia, Memphis, Georgia Southern, Charlotte, Old Dominion, and yes, Appalachian State. And he decided to bring his talents back to Huntington, West Virginia, and suit him up for the herd. And again, just like Mr. Rouse, local kid coming back, going to be able to have the potential to be an impact player immediately for the herd, bringing some of those fans that are going to games anyway, just giving them an extra reason to come and cheer. So I'm really excited to have J.J. Roberts come back to Huntington and suit him up for this herd defense.
Yeah, and in his questions and stuff to the media, it was talked about how, and Huff also alluded to this, that he was sitting in section 102, 103 or something like that. He had a photo, and I think he put it on Twitter as well. But him here watching, with his
as a
family,
little kid.
All right, next is Luke Soto, a tight end. They had him listed here as 6'4", and he corrected me on Twitter via DM. And not in a bad way.
I know,
He just said UTEP had my statistics wrong, and so we deleted it and we posted the correct one and everything. And when I met him in person, I can confirm he is not 6'4". I'm a tall guy and he's 6'6", and he definitely was taller than me. 6'6", 260. Out of UTEP is the transfer, but he's from California. And a couple of things. One, he has a very striking resemblance to Owen Porter. And two, he lettered in rodeo along with football. And coach said, I don't care if you can, get on a horse, hop on a, get a bull down, that sort of thing. He was like, I think you can handle the tight end.
So, if you're a varsity steer wrestler, then you can tackle, I would imagine. But that's cool. This is the first time in all of my years of following recruiting that I've seen anyone that Marshall has been in on letter in rodeo.
Well,
There's
I have
first
to
time
tell
for
you,
everything, man.
I have to tell you, personal, I know that Greg Kellett did that as well. You remember the freak
I
of
do.
nature
I do.
tight end, Greg Kellett?
But I
Maybe
wasn't following recruiting then.
I think Greg Kellett didn't use a horse, though. He just went out there and
Said,
wrestled the bull down to the ground. Man, he was a monster.
yeah.
Next up, we got Chris Thomas, defensive lineman. Really good size here, 6'5", 315, transfer from Florida.
Yeah, and I would this is another guy that I don't remember seeing too much about, and I'm maybe wrong, but I think this is one of those that I think Huff was trying to keep a little closer to the vest. Defensive line playmakers like this, 6'5", 315. You don't want anybody else to know you kind of have them, So pretty excited about this, as with all of these defensive linemen. And I mentioned before that we weren't done before we got here, and I don't think are we still? Is this it? This might be the one I'm thinking of. SEC defensive linemen, you can't have enough of those guys on your roster. So for all the folks that are like, man, we might see a downturn in, this defensive dominance. Yeah, we might, because we were ranked so high. It's hard not to see a little bit of a dip in some places, but defensive line should not be a concern for a lot of people. Again, at least on paper, we have to see how this goes. But man, 3 seasons of eligibility left. Had some interest from Temple, so it's not like it was the herd or nobody, but I don't care. At 6'5", 315 from the University of Florida, I'll add him to the roster. I like a bolstering of the room, the defensive line room, and what Ralph Street has been able to do with those guys has been nothing short of phenomenal. So give him, some guys with some playmaking ability, and I guarantee you he will maximize that talent.
Next up, we got Marc Viechec, linebacker, 6 foot, 225, and he's transferring from Southeastern. And Coach mentioned that Shannon Morrison said, hey, I know that you like guys of a certain size and that this is under that size and everything. But he said, trust me, you're going to want to see this tape. And he said, one of the best I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
So big things expecting out of him for, just a nose for the ball, that sort of thing.
Yeah, defensive player in the year in his in the Sun Conference. So that tells you right there he's got a knack for getting to the football and tackling the football. And we've had some medium success with guys from lower conferences coming here that were, defensive players of the year before. Brian Cavalcante comes to mind. He was an excellent role player for the Herd. He was playing playing alongside some really high performers like Beauplan and Eli Neal and guys like that. But this could be the next, the third link in the chain, I guess, if that's what you want to call it, at the second level, or just could be a really, really dominant role type player for the Herd. Spring ball is going to go a long way into seeing how the pecking order shakes out, right? You can't just award guys a position because you like them or you like what their highlight tape looks like. But if you're the defensive player of the year, you can play ball, period. So 100%. I'm excited. I don't care about a 6 foot 225. I mean, I'm undersized too, but I podcast pretty good.
Second best podcaster we have on this show.
Yeah, right. I'll take top 2.
Nah, I'm by far second. Lloyd Willis, offensive line, get this, 6'7", 315 from Florida State University. And coach said that Telly Lockett, with his experience down there at Florida State, said he's coming. He's like, what do you mean? Like, we need to know he's coming. And it's like, I know, when do we set up a thing? It's like, no, coach, he's coming. His mom packed their stuff up, put him in the car, drove him up here, dropped him off with his stuff, and drove back. There was no recruiting. He said that's the kind of recruits you want, right? You don't have to spend any time on him or whatever. This guy's on board. He's coming. So,
yeah.
I thought that was really good.
That's an excellent story. You're like, oh, you okay? Well, anyway, it's coming from Miami's Killian High School, and if I'm not mistaken, isn't one of our running backs from Killian High School?
I can't remember.
I thought it was. I would like to look it up in real time, but I don't want to do that. But I'm pretty sure we've got one of our running backs from Killian High School as well. But 2 seasons left to play for the Herd, so it's not just a one-year guy. This is probably the third guy that I think Huff was trying to keep close to the vest type thing, because 6'7", 315 on an offensive lineman. Yeah, I think you'll take that. But anyway, look, man, I think this is an overall solid class. Very defense heavy, which is kind of surprising because of how dominant the defense was.
And
now
we're going to talk about that in a little bit, about why. And I think that when we hear what Coach has to say and then our thoughts about that, they're going to find out a little bit about why we took these specific players in these specific groups.
Yeah.
Don't you think so?
Of course.
Yeah.
There's always a method to the madness, and some folks just think it's just madness. But at this point, I think, I trust the staff to bring in the guys we need at the time we need them. Mm-hmm. And one thing we should note is there will be another transfer portal period that opens up following the conclusion of spring ball. It's just something you have to talk about, right? Because that's the end of the spring semester. Guys are free to transfer at that point, and you get them in and on class and enrolled for summer classes, and then they can be a part of your class. So this is still very much a fluid scenario. And I'm not this is not a doomsday scenario. I'm not saying I expect a mass exodus. I'm not saying I expect a lot of people to come flooding in. I'm just saying there is another window that will be open. It's like a 2-week window. So your class is very much not done. So, but for right now, the way it looks right now, I'm feeling pretty good.
And you, sir, were correct. Maurice Jones, our true freshman running back last year, was out of Killian High School.
Thought so.
Yeah. Every now and then you come across a good thought.
Yeah. Every now and again, the synapses and pathways in my brain, from my brain to my mouth, actually work.
All right. So I went to this event yesterday.
Yeah.
And one, I thought that was great that we were included in that. And two, you couldn't go, obviously being down in Tampa and everything. And what am I going to do? I'm going to sit over there and take, my phone and record some audio or something. No, of course not, because we have IgniteLink and we have Jed Horton, CEO of IgniteLink. And man, anytime we need things with technology or to make this, I mean, you're talking high definition and good cameras, good quality audio, the way to set it up and everything, we have IgniteLink. They're a sponsor of ours, but they do just so much more on the technology side. And that's not even what they do as a business.
They're far more than just a sponsor of the show, right? They're really a strategic partner in allowing us to expand what we want to do to provide to our viewers and listeners. Because if it were just you and I, there's no way we could bring the quality of the show of the event that you attended yesterday to the masses, right?
Right.
So it just speaks to the fact of what IgniteLink can do, of things they don't even specialize in, right?
And I have to tell you too, everyone, I went up and kind of adjusted where the tripod was for the high definition camera, and WSAZ and the other people were like, what is that thing? And I was like, that's our camera. And it's so much smaller, obviously, than the news camera. And, Jed was showing them what he does and how he does it and everything. And I just said, hey, new technologies, man. And I mean, that's it.
You don't have to have a camera the size of a rifle case.
Yeah.
You can have a small little camera to do the same work.
So I really cannot say enough about Jed. I cannot say enough about IgniteLink, and we would be remiss if we didn't mention what IgniteLink actually does. One, you can find them on their website at ignite.link, but they do IT management, and they're right here in Huntington. They're huge Herd fans. If you have a small business, if you have a medium business, if you have a large business, if you need IT work, if you need your stuff backed up, do yourself a favor and call Jed at IgniteLink. Go to the website. You can see how to get a hold of him. He's also on Facebook and Twitter with IgniteLink and his own name. And you can find them very easily and talk to them to see what they can do to help your business.
Yeah. If you're a business owner and you're not tech savvy, don't risk the biscuit with your business, right? Just call Jed and say, hey man, here's what I got going on. This is what I need. I guarantee you they can probably have some services or put together some sort of package that will fit your needs. They're just that damn good. So don't risk your sales. Don't risk your, the lifeblood of your business going down to a virus or going down to network communication issues. They're your IT department. If you, I'm not trying to toss shit. If you we can't afford an IT department, and Jed's our IT department, right?
Right.
So they solve our problems. They make it easier for us to do what we want to do, which is our show, right? That's all we want to focus on. So give IgniteLink a call if you have a need for their services. If you think you may need their service, reach out and see what they do, what they can do for you. I think you'll like dealing with them. They're not only huge Herd fans, they're also alumni, and they live locally. Their business is in Huntington. So it's local helping local. Give them a shout if you need them. Give them a shout if you're just curious. IgniteLink, Ignite.link, Ignite at IgniteLink on Twitter, and they're easy to find on Facebook as well.
Yeah, and if you want to reach out to Jed via email, his is very easy as well. He made it great, easy to find. It's Jed at Ignite.link.
Yep.
So very easy to find, very easy to deal with. Great Herd fans. Again, you said it, Herd fans helping Herd fans and doing business with each other. All right, so I was able to go, and we captured footage. We took the video. So what we're going to do here is we're going to show you what Coach had to say, if you haven't seen it, or if you have seen it and just want to see it again, but we're going to break it up and we're going to put our thoughts in here as well. So KD, unless you have something to say to preview this video, we're going to let it roll here, and then we'll cut back over to us to kind of highlight the different things that Coach said.
No, hit it.
But good to see everybody. Welcome back. A really exciting day. For us, it's kind of a combination of 2 days. Obviously, we have the early signing day, and then I get hit with all the questions of, who are the transfers, when are they coming, and we got to kind of let them get in and get in class and kind of get official before we can kind of announce them, and then we get the opportunity today to add them to the rest of the class. So really excited about these young men that we're adding. I think when you get a chance to get to know them, one, their character is going to stick out, the type of young men they are, the competitive energy and character that they display, not only on the field, but also in the classroom and in the community. I think a lot of these guys will fit what we would describe as a Marshall football player. And when you kind of get to know them individually, they kind of fit Huntington and everything that embodies this university and this community. Some of them are from near and some of them are from far. They've got a lot of unique backgrounds. I think that's one thing about college football, especially now in the new age with the transfer portal and NIL and that world that we're living in. There's a lot more stories that you'll be able to kind of write and kind of get to know these guys individually throughout their time here. So I was able to bring in 25 guys total. That number used to be 25 high school guys, and we all get excited about their high school huddle films, but that number now has shifted a little bit. We ended up bringing in 12 high school guys, 13 transfer portal guys. If you guys remember last year, the number was a little bit higher. We've kind of got a model of kind of when we take heavy amount of transfers versus heavy amount of high school guys to try to balance our roster. I think that's the important part with this transfer portal. You can get kind of transfer heavy, and then all of a sudden you get very unbalanced in your roster. So in order for us to keep depth across the board and be able to sustain consistency throughout, we want to have a balance, and that's what we were able to do. We still believe in recruiting the high school athlete. We just have to be able to adapt to the times. You either adapt or you die. The transfer portal is here. It's alive. My opinion or your opinion on if what it should or shouldn't be does not matter. All we know is it's here. There's a lot of positives that come out of the transfer portal. We can think over our time here. There's a lot of guys that have come and played for us that came via the transfer portal. There's a lot of guys that have come and played for us and are still playing for us via the high school rank. So I think it's a really unique situation. We've got to do a really good job of balancing it. I think we've done that, and we'll continue to do that. These young men you'll get a chance to speak to today. went through the recruiting process the right way. They vetted their options. They talked to different coaches. And I think when you talk to them, you'll kind of hear the same resounding message that, this place felt like home. The coaches made them feel like they were important here. They saw opportunity. And that just not only speaks for me, but the coaching staff, but this community. When fans and recruits and prospects come, this community does a really good job of making them feel at home. So we're all in this together. These young men will help us continue to close the gap as we've been doing. We're really excited to get them going here in the fourth quarter program in about a week, and then in the spring ball, and then obviously ending with the spring game before we head into the summer. So,
Coach there said in his intro that he took 25 total people, 12 of them from high school, 13 from transfer. We talked about that already, but he said that it's the combination of the two class early signing period, the natural signing period from yesterday. But he talked about them being Marshall worthy on the field and in the classroom. Mm-hmm. And he talked about how important that was and just said, these are what you would consider to be Marshall players. Mm-hmm. And he wanted to balance the roster and maintain depth. He mentioned that we didn't have a lot of starters on defense that left, but we had some depth that left. So you had to backfill, and that's why it's a little more defensive heavy.
Yeah, and you don't want to run into a scenario. People might think balance, like what does that mean? Well, you don't want to have 40 seniors in a class, for one, because you want to be able to find a nice balance of high school recruiting and be a little bit more selective in the transfer portal to fill those holes. So there's your balance aspect, right? And to be a Marshall guy, you want folks that are approaching the game the right way, that are approaching the community the right way, and that are understanding of what this team, what this university, but particularly the football team means to these people that live in Huntington and the surrounding areas like Ona and Barboursville and Canova. It's special. A lot of teams toss that around. They talk about family, but we deliver that. And it's important that we bring in guys that understand that it's different here than other small college towns. So I love what they're doing. One of the things that we've seen more is fewer and fewer of our guys in those headlines in a negative light. Everything is a positive light. Everything is a community involvement. Everything is, and it's great, man. It's great because they're winning and there's not a cost of winning, right? That we've seen in the past. So there's no trade-off for some negative press just to win a few games. And I love that, man. I love that.
100%. So now we get into, he kind of opened it up to questions and everything, and Paul Swan had the first one, so let's cut to that.
What did you learn in the process last year that helped you this year maximize what you're doing?
I think you got to have balance, and you can look at high school film and then you turn around and look at a transfer, and the surface level eye would be, oh, wow, this player's played, a year or 2 years in college, so we want this player. This high school player, he's going to take time to develop. But I think you got to have balance, and I think the way you do that is kind of staying consistent across the board with how many at each position you plan to take. The other part of it is you got to continue to recruit high school, because sometimes it's a lot easier to just say, well, we'll go to one or two high schools that always have players and get their players. But you got to continue to comb through the country, in your areas as position coaches nationally. I think recruiting has gone a lot more national, although we have a kind of a radius that we stay in. It's still a little more national than it was, 10, 15 years ago. So I think you got to stay consistent to your plan.
So Paul asked there about what he learned from last year. It was his first full recruiting cycle, and then he had the full season and everything. What did he learn to help from this year? And he said what you just said, balance. Mm-hmm. And he said that you have to continue to recruit high school. It's important. And I think what I took from that was not only what you said about the year that they would be. You don't want to have like all juniors and seniors, and then you just have to constantly rebuild, and then you're either throwing freshmen to the wolves, or you're relying only on that cycle of upperclassmen transfers. But I took too that when you continue to recruit in these different pockets and everything, that you create more interest and knowledge of your school, where people know about that logo, they know about that culture, they know about that program. I mentioned it earlier in the show that an underclassman, when a high school senior signs with someone and then they go and follow their career there, they already know about the school at Marshall. You can develop pipelines through that. And it's also building those relationships with those high school coaches and everything. So they say, hey, coach, I know that this guy would fit in the way that you coach and the kind of program you have.
Recruiting is relationships more than anything else. So if you remove yourself from those high schools, you're severing those relationships with coaches, players early on. Like, let's say you go to high school A to recruit a senior quarterback. Well, there may be a nice up and coming sophomore linebacker that's going to be an absolute stud in 2 years. And because you were there 2 years previous and maintained contact with that coach and some other players, by the time that player becomes a senior linebacker, he might really be paying attention to what Marshall's doing. So you cannot get out of the high school recruiting game if for no other reason than to maintain the relationships and continue to, put yourself in front of those high school coaches who are so instrumental in where their players go to college. I mean,
agreed.
Ultimately it's the player's choice of where they're going to go, but they're going to listen heavily to their high school coach go, I don't know if that's the right fit for you, or whatever. I don't see them talking down about anybody. They put a positive spin on, well, this might not be the best option. Have you looked here? So being able to constantly maintain those positive relationships, it's paramount.
All right, here was Luke Creasy with the next question.
When you look at the list of the 25, a lot of defensive guys. Why was that an emphasis this recruiting cycle?
Well, because you guys beat me up for offense, so I figured if I got all defensive guys and they'd let me, maybe I do coach the defense too. But I think, again, replacing the areas that we lost some guys, that's a big piece of it. Depth is a huge piece of it. Offensively, we were a lot younger last year. Not necessarily younger as in freshman, sophomore, but just younger in guys who had not played. And when you throw in the COVID class, we had some older guys on paper, but we had a lot of guys on offense that hadn't played a lot. You think about Cam Fancher, who ended the season. He really hadn't played a lot, but that was his third year in college going into it. So young as in playing experience, but old as in being around for a while. So for us, offensively, we've got some pieces in place. Last year we took a heavy number of offensive guys. Those guys got a chance to develop all year, which will be good for them moving forward. Defensively, we lost some pieces, not necessarily graduating a ton of starters, but we lost a lot of depth and back-end guys, so we had to fill that. And then ultimately, competition is the greatest teacher and greatest motivator. So I'd rather have 3 superstars at one position and make them compete. At the end of the day, they're going to get better, we're going to get better. And I think what we've done is we've created a lot of flexibility, created a lot of competition and depth.
All right, so he asked Coach about the defense and why it was so heavy in this class and everything. And he started off with a joke, kind of said, well, you guys beat me up about not having a good offense, so I had to put it all on defense. I love Coach, man. He has a great relationship with the media, with joking around, and some people might not be in on that joke that it is a joke, but it is, and we all love that. He talked about losing depth on the defense, like we talked earlier. He talked about offense being young people that they brought in last year and stuff like that, and that they had time to develop. So it was just time to bring in more defensive guys, both for that depth, but also because some of the offensive players that they brought in last year would be seasoned and ready for this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was a little surprised to see the overall number of 18-7, defense to offense. When you think about, man, this defense was freaking phenomenal last year. Do they really need to go, 2.5 to 1 basically on offense to defense recruiting? But when you really start to think about it, you get a trio of big name guys that could have left that didn't. And then the guys that just didn't make an announcement that were coming back, like we talked about before. So initially you're thinking this defense is in pretty good shape. But if you're a roster nerd and you dive deeper and you're like, wow, they really did start to lose a little bit on the depth. So he talks about competition, and he mentioned, I'd rather have 3 superstar players at one position, to drive competition at that one position rather than, a handful of, he didn't say this, but I'm saying, rather than what I deduce a handful of medium to high medium players all over the place. So competition brings out the best in everybody. So if you've got a really great defense, and we know Marshall won games specifically because of their defense, we know that. There's no disputing that.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to reload that defense. You've got to take some of the competitions at some of those positions and push that to the forefront, and to see just how good you can possibly be, because you're really good at some positions anyway, right? Nobody's supplanting Owen Porter. Nobody's putting Eli Neal on the bench. Micah Abraham has got one half of that field on lock, but they can't play everywhere. So the competitions at some of those other positions are going to be vital to see how successful Marshall is on the defensive side of the ball. So I understand being defensive heavy. You want to maintain that strength and even kick it up a notch if you can.
Speaking of competition, this next question is going to cover that.
Coach, what's your philosophy on when kids come, whether they're portal guys, whether they're high school kids, to say you can get on the field right away, you just got to work, right? I mean, now does that balance it out even more to whoever the best man is plays?
Yeah, I think, again, when you have competition, it's easier to say, hey, if you're the best player, you'll play. Because usually what happens is everybody sees that, hey, he's better than me right now. Or he's performing more consistent than me is kind of what you usually see. The issue comes when you have no depth and you have to play a guy just because he's the best player in the room. Well, that doesn't necessarily make him the best player for the team. So when you have competition, all these guys love to compete. And I think actually the more competition you have, the easier it is for guys to say, you know what, I've got to beat him out, and he's doing really well, and I got to do really well. I learned that at the University of Alabama. Every day you go to practice, you got to compete to play. There's no handouts, there's no gimmies, there's no, well, I've been here 2 years, so I have to be the starter. And I think that's what we've created a little bit here. And ultimately, they all want to see everybody have success, but the way to do that is to make sure everybody's at their best.
So Keith Morehouse asked about competition and if that's a driver for recruits and the type of recruits that he's getting and everything. And he cited Alabama and said that competition, when you have competitive people there, competition really it just rises the entire team, that everyone there is competing against each other, and it just makes everyone better. And that one thing is that there are no handouts. It doesn't matter if you've been here a couple of years. That doesn't mean you're the starter. There's a competition every year and throughout the season, and that just really pushes everybody.
Yeah. And it's a great thing. We've seen in years past that once you get past the 2 deep, Marshall's depth has kind of fallen off a sizable notch or two. And it doesn't feel like that's the case right now. It feels like at a lot of positions, they can go 3, 4, 5, 6 deep and really not see a sizable drop off in production. And a lot of that has to do with A, the prowess of the recruiting ability of this staff, and B, the culture that they've put in place of there are no handouts. So nobody walks in with an entitled attitude. They know they got to show up every day, and they got to go to work every day. And if they don't bring their A game, they could get supplanted. It's going to be harder to supplant some players. I just gave you 3 guys before. This is going to be incredibly hard to get off the field. But is it possible? Damn right. What if Owen comes in and is like, you know what, man, this is mine. I ain't got to lie. I ain't got to do nothing. And he just doesn't give it his all. Well, coach isn't going to be like, look, we love what you did last year. We're just going to put you in there. You got to work, and believe me, of all guys on the entire roster, nobody's going to take a day. If the last guy to take a day off is Owen Porter. So don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying that's the environment he's put in place. You got to work if you want to play.
So the next question came from Cassidy Wood, and she's going to ask about Coach Guidry, but the answer that Coach gives was one that gave us some news bites. So here we go.
Yeah. Coach, obviously, Lance Guidry goes down a 2-lane. You guys attack the transfer portal, getting these defensive guys. What challenges, if any, were presented during that time with the coaching change?
Well, again, I don't think I think kids are attracted to a culture. And obviously, coaches are very important. Don't get me wrong. Lance Guidry did a heck of a job for us for the 2 years he was here, and for him and his family to be able to go back home. I can't say that I wanted him to go, but I can't say that, he's making a bad decision. But again, I think players attract to a culture. I try to do a really good job as a head coach of being involved in all the recruits. So that not one coach or one side of the ball is so connected to a young man that if that person leaves or whatever, that recruit doesn't feel like he knows someone else on the staff. The Alabama way is they change coaches every year. And Coach Saban has found a way to continuously get kids to come there. And I think, again, we're attracting them to the culture. We're attracting them to the resources. We're attracting them to the core values that are going to make them successful. The coaches and the people that are a part of it are just a piece of it. I think all of these guys trust me that I'm going to hire a very good coordinator and very good position coaches. I met with the leadership committee, and we kind of joked because when I first got here, they all begged me to keep the DC and the D-line coach and the defensive staff that was here. And I said, okay, well, trust me. All right, we hired Lance, we hired the defensive staff, and now they're all like, well, Coach, we'd like to have, Lance back. Well, we did this again 2 years ago, guys. So, again, I think, anytime you have really good people, they develop really good relationships. And like you guys, probably cried when Grant left the HD, and, it hurt a lot of people. But you guys were able to kind of, probably improve when he left. But no, when good people leave, the program, obviously it leaves some hurt feelings because of the connections you make. But I think as the leader of the organization, I've got to be able to show consistency in the type of people I hire so that the players ultimately end up trusting me. And I told the defense, as great as I thought Lance was, ultimately it's them. It's their defense. It's their culture. It's what they do. If they get drafted by the San Francisco 49ers, they can't tell, who to be the DC. They got to go out and play. And I think now where we are in college football, where we are in society in general, kids understand, hey, we're really in control of this team in this, situation. So we will select a coordinator. We have a guy in mind. We're trying to make sure we do it the right way because there's other schools involved with signing day and making sure that we do it the right way. I do have a plan. I know sometimes on third down you guys don't think I do, but we do have a plan. And as I told you guys with the transfers, we will let you guys know so that you guys can write the stories. But again, it's about quality people. It's about people that fit Marshall. Because obviously you don't want to bring anybody in that doesn't fit this community, this university, and our culture. But I am excited about the candidate, and when you guys get a chance to meet him, I think you'll be excited.
All right, so she asked about if it was a challenge with all this defense that was bringing in, about Guidry leaving, how big of a deal that was. And then Coach, after saying that he hated to see him go, but he kind of understood where he was going, being back home, that sort of thing. He said that he is involved with all the recruits. So if any coach leaves and everything, they're still involved with Coach Huff. And I can tell you 100% when they talked to the players, when the media was doing the questions, they all cited Coach Huff and the way he has the culture here. So he is a good recruiter for a reason. And definitely when you're talking to the recruits and they're telling you he's one of the reasons I'm here or he's the reason I'm here, that tells you how good of a recruiter he is.
But would the DC candidate be in-house or external? We can tell us about your potential hire for it.
Yeah, it's combination. I don't know yet because it comes down to a lot of things. Resources, right? You got to, resources come into play. Families come into play. Some candidates in-house are a possibility. As we vet through the list and kind of narrow it down to the final guy, it'll kind of come with all of those things, right? Resources, families that move, people have kids in school, those type of decisions. So probably I would say by this time next week we'll know, but it's kind of a checklist, right? This option, this option, this option. We kind of paused it for Marshall Day at the governor's at the Capitol today and signing day, so we'll be able to finish it the next couple of days.
He talked that within about a week or so, we're hoping to have a defensive coordinator, and he said that he has a specific guy in mind and that they were just trying to wait out a little bit of signing day and that sort of thing.
Yeah. I think what he said was we're trying to do it the right way. And I like that he's given them time to get through signing day. They're given, they have to talk to families and see if families want to move. Kids are in school and there's a lot of moving parts, right? It's not just like, hey, we want you to be the DC. Okay, I'll be the DC. I'll be there. If it were that easy, then, these processes wouldn't be processes. But there's a lot more moving parts involved. So I'm excited personally because this is one that you kind of got to get right. I mean, this is a big time hire, and he didn't fully shoot down the fact that it could be an internal hire. He didn't shoot down the fact that it wouldn't be an outside hire. So there's still a little bit of speculation there for fans to draw to and that sort of thing. But this will be one that a lot of people will have an opinion on no matter what. And certainly we will.
Mm-hmm. Now, those last two questions were about the defensive coordinator, but then there was a follow-up almost immediately, and we're going to get to that right now, but it had to do with more coaching.
And same with the O-line coach. Will Bill Legg continue being the O-line?
Yeah, Bill Legg's going to continue to be the O-line coach. Billy Gonzalez will come in and be our tight end coach. Obviously, Bill Legg took over kind of midway. Bill Legg's background has been kind of O-line for a long time. I try to hire people that have flexibility. Right, you're at a place like Marshall where you got to maximize your resources. You can't just say, "Hey, we're at, Ohio State where we're going to pay the top dollar for this guy to do this job." I think you got to have flexibility. Turnover and change is a part of what you deal with at the Group of 5 level. I would imagine that every team at the Group of 5 level. So, for example, I talked to Sean Clark over the break. He and I become good friends just because he's here, from the Charleston area. He's had 4 offensive coordinators in 4 years. That's what happens at the Group 5 level. When you're good, people move on and get opportunities. That's the beauty of what we do, just like players, right? When they play well, they move on and get other opportunities at the next level. So this level is a level that you got to be ready to kind of flex and pivot. So Bill Legg will kind of just stay in place. Billy Gonzalez, who is, background-wise is a receiver coach. He's done some running backs. But, again, a lot of the tight end stuff is a combination of receiver and O-line. So, you have Bill Legg and Billy Gonzalez who ultimately can combo the tight end position. I think Coach Gonzalez is going to give us a lot of experience. You're talking about a guy who won 2 national championships. I won 1. He's won 2. He may know more than me. A guy that's recruited at a really high level. A guy that's developed players at a really high level. It doesn't matter what position. If you can develop a player, you can develop a player. That's finding out the player's weaknesses, developing a relationship with the player, and getting him motivated to improve. That's what development is. And I think Coach Gonzalez has done a really good job of that. He's going to bring a wealth of knowledge for me. He's been around a lot of really good head coaches. He's coached in a lot of really good leagues. So really excited to have him on board as well.
All right, so they followed up and said, "Is Bill Legg going to be the offense coordinator?" He said, or offensive lineman, misspoke. And he said yes, and he talked a lot about Bill Legg, and then he said, "I'm bringing in Billy Gonzalez for the tight ends coach," and a little bit about Billy. He has extensive with wide receivers and tight ends, but he's also had a history with running backs. He's also been, this wasn't mentioned in there, but when you look at his bio, he's been co-offensive coordinator at a couple of places. If I remember correctly, it was maybe Indiana or Illinois.
I think it was Illinois.
Illinois. One of those I schools up there. Illinois and Mississippi State, I believe. And he's also a 2-time national champion, as Coach talked about, and that was at the University of Florida. So pretty good long career of his so far for still a pretty young guy.
Yeah, and he mentioned, Coach Huff mentioned that he's an excellent recruiter, which is always something you have to have in those positions. Little tongue-in-cheek comment, which was great. Another one of those jokes that Coach Huff is becoming so well known for. He said he's won 2 national championships. I've only won only won 1, so he probably knows more than I do. But I love it. I love this hire. It's a name that I've heard before in coaching circles before. So this is not a guy that I'm completely unfamiliar with, but I would be lying to you if I told you I knew his bio up and down. I don't. But when you start talking about it and you start seeing some of these other stops, you start to get really excited. So bringing in another great recruiter who's worked the states of Florida, Mississippi, worked the Midwest a little bit, won a couple of national titles, got some hardware to show off, former OC that's coming to staff, just another bit of offensive mindedness that can offer some creativity or some ideas or maybe see things from a different lens. This is exactly the type of hire that you have to have in these positions. And moving Bill Legg over to be full-time offensive line coach, as I mentioned before, no-brainer. Yeah. Some of the best offensive lines and linemen ever to play at Marshall were under the tutelage of Bill Legg.
All right, so these last questions we're going to let play the rest of the interview, and it's going to be all of them together. Nothing as newsworthy as what it was before, just a little bit of, Coach, what's your strategy kind of deal. So let's hear those.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Not to put you on the spot, but because JJ's a local kid and obviously playing at a high level, how important is it for you to reach out to those guys and have a guy like him who's been in the battles and also, wanted to be here? How important is it to get?
We don't reach out to the guys. We wait until they officially enter the portal, and then we do things. Yeah, no. I think it's really good. I think anytime a young man is willing to come back home, it says two things. It says, one, his experience here before he left was good, and it says what he sees from afar that's going on here now is good. JJ's one of the young men. He had a lot of options. When you go to Wake Forest and those type of schools, academically, you put yourself in a whole nother realm. So he could have went to another academic school. He could have went, all across the country. But for him to want to come back, that says a lot about him as a person, says a lot about his family. And it says he sees an opportunity here. And that ultimately is all you can ask for in life. So him being able to come back, I think, again, that shows, he's another young man that's going to be on the team that's from here. I think Owen Porter's probably another young man that's from here that's really maximizing his opportunity in this community. JJ's going to have an opportunity to do the same thing. You flip it around. We've got some kind of herd legacies that are on the team now that are going to have an opportunity not only to kind of play where their father played, but kind of engrave their own lane, and that's another good thing. They not only do they've been getting hit with the Marshall for life. JJ grew up in his parents were telling me like section 102. He's got a picture of like a Marshall shirt, him and his friends at a game. If that experience wasn't good, he wouldn't have came back. So everything matters. And I know sometimes we don't think so, but everything matters, man. When you go to the gas station, what people say to you matters. When you grow up here and you're 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, what people say about Marshall matters. When your parents play here and you grow up with the Marshall love and logo, it matters. So we try to make sure that the experience for everybody, because you never know. You never know when that young man sitting in section 103 is going to come back and make some big plays for us.
You mentioned in the past about closing the gap. Does this recruitment class close that gap, and if so, how?
Yeah, I don't know if it does because we got to play the game, and I think the gap is not just players. Now, that's a big part of it. Don't get me wrong. But the gap is everything, resources, right? How many trainers do we have? Do we have training table? Do we have a nutritionist? Are we able to keep the guys healthy? Are we able to pay the staff so that when opportunities come, we can be competitive? Are we able to fill the stadium? Are we able to be active in the NIL lane for the guys that are here so that they can, maximize their opportunities? So the gap is not just players. Now, the gap is coaching too, right? We got to make the right call on third down. We got to have a good plan. But this is a big piece of it because at the end of the day, the players on the field make a huge piece. But we've got to do some things and continue to do some things resource-wise. And we're not there yet, but we've got to continue to do some things resource-wise so that when that player steps on the field, he is the most resource player in the conference. When that happens, then the gap will be closed, and then we'll be chasing the next gap. For where we're going with the college football playoffs, you don't get into the college football playoffs. It's not a lottery system where they just, they roll the big ball and then Marshall's in. That's not how it happens. You got to play your way in, and you got to play your way in for 2 or 3 years. You take the Cincinnati model, right? You can't just have a good season. So these young men are going to help us make strides towards that, but we got to continue as a university, as a community, to close it as well. It kind of goes together.
Coach, you mentioned the fourth quarter program. How crucial is that when you're introducing 25 new players to get them used to the Marshall way?
Yeah, I think, when you look back on it, it's probably the most critical piece of the entire organization. So you look back to when we first got here, the first year. We didn't get a full fourth quarter program because of COVID. So we had, you go 2 weeks and you have to stop. Or you get a COVID breakout and you have to shut down for 10 days. Or you can't work out in groups of more than 10. All right, and we won 7 games. At the end of that season, we wore down pretty good. Well, we come back, full calendar year, we get a full fourth quarter program every day. All the workouts, all the drills, all the extra meeting time, all of those things, and the result was a lot different. So I think, again, it's the most important part of the entire phase that we have, obviously because it sets the foundation, especially when you're introducing 25 new guys. And these guys, all of them should be contributing some way, somehow to the level of their ability. So, again, for them to have a good foundation set in what it takes how we do things, what it takes to physically and mentally be ready to play, springboards us into the spring, which springboards us into the summer and the season.
All right. Thank you, Coach Huff.
Good. Thank you, guys. Look forward to seeing you guys at the event inside. Appreciate all you do. Welcome back. Excited to get this season going. Go Herd.
All right. So he was asked if recruiting was easy for him because he's a recruiter. He said he didn't know that it was necessarily easy, that he feels like if you be yourself and you outwork everybody and you also know that you let everybody know the type of coach you are is that you're going to have to work hard for him, and you will attract those kind of recruits, that the people that want to work hard will come to somewhere where they know they have to work hard.
Yep.
Other questions, and I'll let you chime in with all this, but asked about local guys. He talked about the legacies and that sort of thing, things we've talked about a lot about. Someone asked if this class closes the gap, and he talked more about no, resources is going to do more to close the gap. So we've talked about that. NIL through the Thunder Trust, Big Green, those sort of things, commitment to facilities, the programs, all that's going to close the gap more. But he said that, yeah, these players and the coaches and all that are going to help close the gap. And then they finished talking about the fourth quarter program and having a full year in that fourth quarter program. So final thoughts from you on those questions.
Yeah. Initially I've got to say that talking about from the recruiting standpoint, if you're not wanting to attract the type of guys that are going to be an outlier in your program, right? You want the guys that are going to come to work, and that's the expectation, and they know the expectation. You don't want a guy who just says, yeah, okay, whatever, I'll show that, and then thinks he's going to be given a position or isn't willing to put in the work in the weight room or on the practice field or in the film room or whatever is asked. So it's okay to pass on those guys, even if they have a higher rating, whatever that means that we keep talking about. It doesn't matter if he's not your type of guy, he's not contributing to the success of your program. So you're willing to sacrifice what may be raw skill set, raw talent for the right type of attitude. 100% behind that, right? Because that, from a team mentality, is what's going to go farther and farther into winning games and building a program. Number two, resources. We've talked about it. We need fans to step up, right? We've stepped up. And we've been able to do that largely in part from our wonderful sponsors, right? They make it easier for us to step up. But individually, outside of what we do here on this show, we've stepped up. And you can't build a championship program with fair weather support, right? That's fair to say. And we keep talking about it, and we're going to keep talking about it. Whatever you can do, find that number, find that level that you can do, and do it. Don't overstretch your boundaries. We're not trying to impress anybody here. Like, if you can do $10 a month, do $10 a month. If you can do 5, do 5. It doesn't matter. Just whatever you can do it. And once we all start rolling, then we can start to close, like Huff said, that next gap.
Yep. Coach said, if you can only do $5 one time, just do it. That's 5 more than you gave last year.
Yep. So this was an amazing episode. Special thanks to IgniteLink for helping us power this thing. That is your current 2023 National Signing Day recap. We'll have a lot more as the season gets closer and closer. We'll get into spring ball position group breakdowns and the next transfer portal window. But for now, Russ, take us out of here.
All right. Whether you see us at the Joan, whether you see us at the Cam, or whether you see us over at a media event, getting to cover some really kick-ass stuff like this signing day stuff, no matter where you see us, we're going to be saying, go Herd.
It's the ThunderCast. We'll see you on the next episode. Later.